Hello and welcome to another episode of the MindCep Podcast, helping you maximize your performance. And this is your host, Alex Muir. In today's episode 27, we're going to be talking with our special guest, Rocky Romanella. Rocky is the CEO and founder of 3Sixty Management Services. He's the author of the 5-star book, Tighten the Lug Nuts. And Rocky's going to share with us his extensive leadership experience throughout his career, 36 years at UPS, moving all the way up the ranks from truck loader all the way up into high leadership roles within UPS. And he's also going to talk about some key insights into his book, Tighten Your Lug Nuts. So please welcome, without further ado, Rocky Romanella to the podcast. And this episode is brought to you by RadioGuestList.com, the #1 free radio guest, podcast, and talk show guest expert interview booking service on the internet. And welcome to the MindCep Podcast. And this is your host, Alex Muir. And in today's special guest, we have Rocky or Rocco Romanella. Rocky, appreciate you joining us today on the podcast. And we have lots to talk about today. And number one, we got to talk about your book, Tighten the Lug Nuts, and balancing leadership in organizations large and small. So first, I wanted to definitely start off by talking a little bit about your book. I was doing a little bit of reading last night on kind of your book and your outlook and your background, and you have a very, very long tenure, how you got your start. Like you were saying, like you paid for your way through college, university, and then right out of high school, you worked for 36 years with UPS, and you worked your way up the ranks, all the way up into high leadership positions. And if I recall correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, but you also became the CEO of, and you handled all the logistics and everything for the UPS store, and getting that that registered trademark for all that stuff for Mexico, US, and Canada, was it? Or even further than that. Yes, yeah, so absolutely incredible, and definitely our listeners will definitely want to hear about that and kind of how your journey all started, and give us a little bit of details about that.
Well, Alex, it's a pleasure to be on the show with you today, and certainly an interesting career. Started out, as you said, unloading trailers part-time in New Jersey. And it was a way for me to work my way through school. And UPS had a promotion from within policy, which I took advantage of by working hard. And I learned some valuable lessons there. It started, though, with my dad, who since passed, but was such a big influence in my life. And when I started at UPS, he said to me two things. He said, hey, whatever they ask you to do, say yes and thank you, and then learn your job and learn some more. And so as I was working my way up, I may not have always felt ready for that next job, and UPS would tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, we got this new assignment for you. You know, I probably had that look on my face like, really, you think I'm the right person for this job? And, you know, the thing I learned there is that oftentimes as a leader, you have to believe in your people until they're ready to believe in themselves. And so you bridge the gap as a leader. You know, Alex starts this new assignment. He may be a little bit nervous. He may not feel he has may not have the confidence or the skill yet. But you bridge that gap by believing in them, and then you get to that kind of break-even point where you're feeling good about yourself, the organization feels good about you, and then you really start to fly, and that's when you step back as a leader. And so for me, that was an important learning lesson. And as you said in the intro, I managed mailboxes, et cetera. We rebranded to the UPS store. At that time, it was worldwide, so I had the worldwide operations. And then we purchased over 20 companies and built what's today UPS Supply Chain Solutions. And I had this side of the world. Had operations in Canada for both MBE and the UP and supply chain. Retired after 36 years, and then started as the CEO of a telecom company. We built cell towers, upgraded cell towers. So had some great opportunities along the way, and always in the background over my shoulder was my dad saying, hey, whatever they ask you to do, just say yes and thank you.
Incredible. Yeah, and that's very, very good advice. Anytime your parents are just giving you that little bit of a push, it's just being all about, open to opportunity. And when you're open to opportunity, great things can happen.
Oh, absolutely. It's funny. The third thing he told me later on was he said, "Hey, it's what you do when no one's watching that counts." And I remember saying to him, "Dad, you just kind of ruined it. No one's watching. That's probably, it's a pretty good thing, if no one's watching." And he said, "There's always two people watching, the man upstairs and the person looking in the mirror." And, when you think about it from that perspective, you have to look in the mirror at the end of the day and know you did the best job you could. You may not have been as successful as you wanted. It may not have gone the way you wanted it to go, but you have to know that you did the best job you could, as a basketball player, a hockey player, baseball player, whatever sport that, you want to pick. You never want to leave anything in the tank. You want to leave it all on the field and know you did the best job you could. And it's the same in business and in life. You got to look in the mirror and feel good about the fact that you gave it your best shot.
Yeah, no, exactly. And one thing I don't think I've asked previously in interviews, but one thing I've always been very interested in is how, let's say someone is a CEO or they're in a very high position in a company, or they've been self-employed for a very long time and they run their own very large company. How does one like that, a person working for a company or owning their own company, how do they have that balancing act of, their time in their company that's spent there? Let's say it could be anywhere from 50 to 80 hours a week or 45 to 60 hours a week. And then they still got their family. They've got, let's say, pets, they got kids, and they've got their spouse. How does one balance all that, still be successful, have a thriving, successful business or career, but still find the time or create the time for their spouse and their family? Like, that's the one thing I've always found kind of, very interesting, but I'm at the same time, I'm like, how does one balance all that out?
Well, I think there's two important things to keep in mind as you go through this journey. And now clearly I'm looking back with years of experience of probably not doing it the right way. So, if my family, my kids were listening, they'd be like, "Dad, really? I mean, now you figured this out, right?" Kind of idea. But I think the two things, the first one is don't let your highs get too high and your lows get too low. So if you can understand that, and that's so important because you're going to have some really good days, but don't be out there, kind of spiking the football and over celebrating, because quickly you're going to have some tough days too. And it's just that cycle you go through. So if you can keep that in balance where you don't let your highs get too high and your lows get too low, that keeps you in a good place. And it helps you then, on the balancing act you're going to try to do between your personal life and your professional life. I think when it comes to that balance, the most important thing is you have to understand and put things into two categories: nice to do things and need to do things. And I think one of the mistakes I made throughout my career was I put everything into need to do. Everything was important, how to get it done. Well, I look back today and there were many things that were nice to do things that I put in need to do. And if you're not careful, if you put everything in need to do, well, then something has to be compromised. And generally it's your family time, or it's your personal time, or it's that time you need to decompress, because you're doing nice to do things that in retrospect you really didn't need to do. So I think it's important to put things into nice to do and need to do. And in those things that are nice to do, and you've got a choice of going to your son's Little League game or your daughter's cheerleading event or whatever, or just taking your wife out or spouse or partner out to dinner, you can make that decision to say, you know what, that's a nice to do thing. It'd be nice to do it, but I don't really need to do it. What I really need to do is, take that important person in my life out to dinner. That's what's so important. But if you put everything on one way or another, you're out of balance. If everything's, I'm going to take care of myself, well, then you probably miss some important things inside your professional life. If you put everything in your professional life as a need to do thing, then you probably are out of balance in your personal life. So I think those are the two things I would say. First one is don't let your highs get too high and your lows get too low, and then understand the difference between nice to do things and need to do things.
No, that's really well said. Yeah. Because that's something that I've always been trying to process and trying to articulate, the best way that I know how as of right now. Like, I'm only 27 years old right now, but I definitely have learned a lot from people like yourself and previous guests that I've had on. But that's a question I've never asked, and I've always been super curious of how people do it, because there's lots of people that have achieved great things, but there's always sacrifices that need to be made. And it's just a matter of knowing, what sacrifices you're willing and not willing to make.
I think that's a great point. And when you look back and you think about some of the sacrifices, and then if they were sacrifices on those kind of nice to do things, you think to yourself, wow, I missed out on that opportunity. And that is the one thing that you learn is that, the most precious gift that you have is time. Time is that precious gift that you never get back. And so if you squander that time or you squander the opportunity, and squander sounds a little bit harsh. If the decisions you make during that time, that you spent, you look back and you say, wow, I'm 27 right now, as you said, but you're only going to be 27 once. And you look back and you're thinking, okay, what could I have done different? What could I have done better? Many times it comes down to how you spent that precious time. And that's that gift. That's that precious gift that you never get back. And it's also a great gift that you're given to that spouse or significant other or important person in your life, to your family, to other people important in your life. And that's a great gift. And you'd hate to think that you miss an opportunity to spread that gift around.
No, for sure. And the way Tim Ferriss put it is time's non-renewable, and you've only got so much of it. But money comes and goes, and it can come in waves and or a little bit less. And you can always get money back, but you can never get your time back. So
yeah, it's a great point he has, Tim.
Yeah. And who would you say, like throughout your career or when you're beginning your career with UPS, what kind of books did you read that you really, really liked? Doesn't have to necessarily be self-help or personal development, but what kind of education would you utilize, let's say outside of work or university, that just you're really drawn to that really helped you learn the process of becoming who you are today?
Well, that's a great question. So for me, I went to college to be a high school history teacher and a baseball coach, interestingly enough. And so what happened was, as I was working my way through college and taking classes to become a teacher, I noticed that the best leaders were those individuals who could get their people to connect the dots. And so I never gave up my passion of being a teacher and a coach. I just did it in a different setting. It wasn't in a traditional classroom. It was in a business setting, and it wasn't on a field. It was in a business setting. And so for me, that influential person was legendary coach John Wooden from UCLA basketball. And Coach Wooden was just a tremendous human being. He was a teacher before he was a coach. He developed his pyramid of success. So I read all Coach Wooden's books. I actually, Alex, had the privilege and the honor to meet Coach Wooden. I actually spent 4 hours with him during my time at UPS. We had a project, and we were going to profile a famous individual to talk about leadership. And I had just seen Coach Wooden talk. And I took the chance, reached out to the UCLA. He had since retired when I reached out to him, but he retired from UCLA. And I reached out to the UCLA athletic department, and sure enough, they gave me his phone number. Long story short, I ended up reaching out to him and spent 4 hours with him. In fact, on my website, 3Sixty managementservices.com, number 3 in the word 60, managementservices.com, I actually have an hour interview with Coach Wooden if anyone's interested. But so he was my most influential person who wasn't a family member or some significant person in my UPS career. Coach Wooden, I read all his books, and today I probably quote him more than anyone else of individuals that I had read or learned from.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome, because he was a hell of a coach.
Oh,
like he's
amazing.
Got like and I believe he was there the same time that a lot of some really big players were coming into the NBA. Like,
oh yeah,
I remember he coached. I'm thinking of Chris Webber for Michigan State.
No, he coached Lou Alcindor, who then became Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He had Bill Walton. He had Bill Walton.
Yeah.
It's a great story in his book. He talks all the time about his time with Walton. And Walton was like the freshman of the year. He comes in the following year. So Coach Wooden had very specific guidelines. And it's funny, he came in and you weren't allowed to have a beard or facial hair at UCLA. And so of course Bill Walton comes in and he's got a beard after his great freshman year, and he's kind of like touted as one of the greatest college basketball players. And so of course he knows Coach Wooden's not going to be happy, but he's so he comes in and he says, look, Coach, before, and I'm paraphrasing the story that Coach Wooden told me, but of course it's in his books, but he says, Coach, before you get upset, it's a free country. People have died for our rights. And, I feel like it's my right to be able to have a, kind of beard. and facial hair. And Coach Wynn looks at him and says, "Hey, you know what? You're absolutely right. It's one of the greatest countries in the world. And just let me know what team you're playing on, and I'll be your biggest fan." And so Walton looks at him and goes, "Excuse me?" He goes, Coach Wynn says, "Yeah, you tell me what team you're on. I'll be your biggest fan." He goes, "Are you telling me I can't play here?" He goes, "No, I didn't tell you couldn't play here. You've decided that you don't want to play here because you're not going to follow the rules." And that's such a great lesson and such a great approach. I'm not making this decision. You are.
Yeah.
And I think that you think about in business and you think about people that you lead or people in your care as a leader, many times they look at you as the person making that decision. You're not, you know, the rules and regulations, it's like the Yankees. I mean, the Yankees don't have facial hair. I mean, when you become a Yankee, it's not a doubt in your mind that, hey, I'm going to shave. I mean, but I'm going to probably win a World Series. I'm going to probably get to a championship game. So I can't shave fast enough, right? Because I'm going to be on a winning team. So I think that was one of the valuable conversations I had with him when we talked. He told me the whole Walton story. Later on, I was at Seton Hall University here in New Jersey, and I do some things there and try to help out and speak to juniors and seniors as they're moving through their college careers and beginning their work life. And actually, Bill Walton was there one day signing some books on a speaking tour, visiting the Seton Hall basketball team. And so I got a chance to talk to him, and I looked at him. I said to him, hey, I know the story. He looked at me, goes, "You talked to Coach Wooden?" I said, "Yeah, I know the whole story." So we talked about it. And of course, Coach Wooden has since passed, but it was funny. The two of us just sat there. He goes, "Man, you spent 4 hours with him in his condo. That's precious." I go, "Oh, let me tell you what, it's one of those moments I'll never forget."
Right on. That's incredible. And so you got to meet Bill Walton and John Wooden at two separate occasions. That's incredible.
Yes, yeah. And they're talking about the two of them. It was pretty funny. It was pretty wild. He kind of looked at me and goes, "Look, you're the common denominator, man." I go, "Yeah, I guess so."
You're the man.
I said, "Look at this."
Them both.
Yeah. I said, I'm the middle of the H because you're like 6'10" and he was like 6'8". I said, and I'm this 5'7", 5'6", well 5'6" on a good day, little Italian guy between two of the biggest guys I've ever met. He laughed. I said, "Yeah." I go, "I'm the bar in the H there."
Wow, that's incredible. And on a side note, for your company, 3Sixty Management Services, for the companies or the business owners that you consult with, what would you say would be their largest challenge with their business? What is their most common concern that when they're, they could be in business for 30 years, 10 years, 5 years, or, startup, just starting off? What would be their largest challenge that you help them that kind of dissect and break down?
It's interesting because I work with a lot of very small businesses and I work with large corporations, as you said. But interestingly enough, it seems to always be the same concept of where they allow their strength to become their weakness. And think about a very small business, right? It's fun to work with entrepreneurs. They're the backbone of both the every country's economy. But it's interesting, their strength becomes their weakness. So what's their strength? Their strength is nobody knows business better than they do. No one's more vested than they are. No one's more committed to the business than they are. What's their weakness? No one's vested in the business more than they are. No one's more committed than they are. And so what happens is they become very tactical. Well, one of the things, and it's the same with large businesses, they do what they do really well. But the goal, the key is, as Wayne Gretzky would say, you have to go to where the puck's going, not to where the puck's been. And so if you think about that small business owner, they're so involved in the day-to-day execution, but part of their responsibility is to take that step back and start to have a vision. What am I going to look like in the next 6 months, 12 months, or 18 months from now? And it's no different in a large corporation. If you think about it, on the 105-year anniversary, 107-year anniversary, right around there, of the Sears and Roebuck catalog, they stopped having a catalog. And at that time, Sears was the largest retailer in the world, I believe. And when asked why they don't have a catalog, the CEO said, "No one buys on catalogs anymore." Well, if you think about it, who's Sears today? It's Amazon. You could buy anything you want in a Sears catalog. Now you can buy anything you want out of Amazon. So it's not that people weren't buying in catalogs. So large companies have the same issues that small companies do, right? They become too tactical, and they don't, they have to take that step back, and you have to start to have vision. Out of this pandemic now, there are going to be companies that are going to be bigger, better, stronger coming out of this. There's going to be companies that are struggling, that barely make it. And then there's going to be those companies that have already closed already. And so those people in the middle, the only way they're going to get to that bigger, better, stronger is to manage through it, understand what we're going to look like, and where's the puck going? What's the business going to look like in the future? And I think that's what would be that. So that same issue of allowing your strength to be your weakness is the same in small businesses as it is in large businesses. How do you get that strategic vision?
Right. And I really like the way you said that, because I'm working for a small business right now, and we were hit by the pandemic pretty hard. So I was off work for 2 months. And so what I do at work is promo marketing. So we help businesses with their branding and their swag. So it's a really unique role, which is promo marketing is much bigger in the US. It's got a lot of room to grow, because nowadays it's more than ever. Companies need branding, they need swag, they need their company top of mind, and especially even in Canada, a lot more small business owners are doing the full vehicle wrap of their logo and their website and all that on their vehicles. So I'm noticing a lot more, I'd say over these last 3 to 5 years, that a lot more people are focusing on their branding and getting their name and their brand out there of their business and their website and all that. So with what I do at my work, fortunately, we've been able to recover a lot faster, because that's where things are heading. A lot more small businesses, smaller mom and pop shops, they might not be able to recover from this pandemic, but a little bit, small to medium sized businesses, depending on their business model, they definitely have potential to pivot or to recover from this pandemic just as fast as we have, because there's demand for all sorts of different branding services that we can offer. So it's just one of those things where it's a lot, like you said, a lot of businesses were relying on older habits that no longer can be served in this economy right now with the pandemic and everything going on. So it's more that we have to pivot, or we have to just change some strategies to new strategies. That's all.
Well, and I think I think that's very true. I think you've articulated that very, very well. And I also think it's an understanding of, so what do I think the future is going to look like? And if you think about it for a second, think about what, businesses and companies all go through, this whole kind of exercise of where they have what they call continuity planning. How do we get through difficult times? How do we get through, events? But most of the events are either hurricanes, floods, massive snowstorms, things like that. It's, strikes if you're in a, maybe in a union environment or something like that. This was completely different, right? And so their continuity planning wasn't for this. And so if you think about it, I think there's going to be, moving forward, there's going to be more, you're going to have more distance learning. You're going to have more people working from home, but you still have to have, you still want to build a, culture inside your organization. So how do you balance that of, I'm going to have more people distance learning, I'm going to have more people working from home, but I want them to feel like they're part of something special. I want them to feel like they're part of the organization. So when you think about it from that perspective, A, you're going to have to, kind of move your company in that direction, or B, companies are going to grow out of that. How do I handle distance learning? How do I have a virtual conference call? How do I have a virtual meeting? How do I have those kinds of things? So it'll be interesting to see how things move forward coming out of this.
No, for sure. And I've talked to a lot of my previous guests, and I've asked them that same question, like, how do you see things changing after this pandemic's over? Because this pandemic's going to be going on for a few years at least. And one of my guests, his name's Gerald Leonard. He wrote a book called The Culture is the Base. And he specializes in helping companies with their culture. And what he does is he helps current or new CEOs or board of directors with their companies, either gelling together what culture they have in mind for helping out the company when they're coming into a new company. He helps amalgamate their view on the culture with the employees and make sure it all gels together so the culture stays intact and it stays strong. So he talked about that, and he said he believes that there's definitely going to be a lot more software and all that in these next little while. Like even he was saying companies across the US there's a lot of people working from home now, like for a lot of different roles. So, yeah.
Well, I think this is going to be a very important part of a company strategy going forward. Because if you think about it for a second, I mean, people ask me all the time, oh, you were with UPS for 36 years. And, obviously in today's world, you don't hear a lot of, that kind of longevity. But for me, I tell people all the time, I didn't agree with everything that happened at UPS. I didn't disagree enough to leave. And if you think about that if you think about that for a second, it's because my values, my ethics, the things that I was kind of brought up on match with UPS. I mean, UPS never asked me to violate a law, break a policy. We had some rough days. There's no doubt about it. But at the end of the day, I felt like I fit there. And if you think about when people are coming out of school and they're looking for that next job or they're working for a company today, they have to feel like they fit values, ethics, and culturally there. Because if you do, then you can ride out the rough days. But if you feel like you're being compromised or you feel like your values, your ethics, the things that are important to you, like for me, hard work, enthusiasm, doing the best job that I could was very, very important to me. That's how I was brought up. That was well, UPS recognized hard work, recognized results, recognized people that were loyal and those kinds of things. Well, I fit. But if those aren't important values to you at some point, you're going to leave because that's not what's important to you. So as we move forward and we start to work in this new world, the turnover that you may get inside your organization is generally, people always say, oh, people leave because the pay's not enough. Pay is really not as big a deal as everybody thinks it is. It becomes a big deal when you don't fit in an organization. Because when people say you don't pay me enough, what they're really saying is you don't pay me enough for what you're asking me to do.
Right.
Because when I took this job, I knew the job paid X. But now all of a sudden X isn't enough. Well, why isn't it enough? Because you don't pay me enough for the things you're asking me to do. You're asking me to do this job, but you don't treat me with dignity and respect. I don't feel like I'm valued, or I feel like there's no promotion process in place for me. I don't see a path forward. Well, now you can see where that question now goes to. You don't pay me enough for what you're asking me to do in this kind of environment. And I think to your point, and to his point in his book on the culture is going to be so important, because if I don't feel like I fit and you're not working on making me feel like I fit in this organization, I'm simply going to leave.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's where the challenge lies right now. And it has for a lot of people like my age and younger and even a little bit older. Cause I put such a high priority on culture and my morals and my ethics. Like it all has to gel together. And
that's right.
And I always go back to my previous experience when I was working at the bank. So as I was finishing my degree, I was a little torn because I was in the midst. I was halfway, just under halfway finished my business degree at school where I'm from, but then this banking opportunity came up, and that's the whole reason I went to university, is because I wanted to get into the bank, because I was just obsessed at that time with finance and numbers and money, and because I told my parents, I said I want to learn, I want to be really educated with understanding money and how to talk money with, whether it be just investing or lending, credit. I just want to understand it, because a lot of people, they don't understand it, and it's like, if you don't understand money, I feel like earlier on, it's just it can be a little challenging as you get older, because it's a lot of different language, and like it can be learned at any age. But for myself personally, I just wanted to learn it really early on to kind of jumpstart things. So when I do make, grow into the income or the money that I desire, that I'll have the understanding, and I'll be able to keep it longer, because it's about longevity for me. So, but the job that I was able to get into, I was 20 years old. I was just 20 years old. And I was telling my parents, I'm like, I should finish my degree, but they're like, no, make the judgment call, because this bank paid really good money, and they were going to pay for me to take my mutual fund license. And so I was like, I have to take this. And, I know I got to put school off, but, if I take this opportunity, it'll jumpstart my career. And I never looked back, and it definitely did. So I was there. It was an affiliate bank of CIBC, which in Canada is a Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce. And we do have a few states, I think, that CIBC is in the U.S. I'm not sure where. It's mainly on the East Coast, I think. But so I was working for their affiliate bank, which is like their child bank, Simply Financial, which at the time was called PC Financial. And I was there for 3 years, and that's a place where the culture, my values, my ethics, everything was in line. And then for these last few years, it's just a little bit more challenging because I was a banker, and that became a big part of my identity. And I did that for 4 years. And these last, I'd say 2.5 years, I've been kind of bouncing around because like the culture and all that, it hasn't been in line with my morals and my ethics and kind of my vision. Because I have a very clear vision. It's just, my vision hasn't lined up with the company's vision. So that's why I feel by doing this podcast, I can discover tools and tactics and principles from all my guests to kind of help me build, carve that path and make it a little bit more clear. And for anyone listening too.
That. Yeah, and think about it. That's what's so important. And I think that's why when I go back to what I said is, hey, look, I didn't agree with everything that happened at UPS. I didn't disagree enough to leave. And that helps you through the difficult times. Like every day wasn't a great day at the bank. I mean, you had your ups and downs, but you felt like you fit. I always equate it to when kids go, visit the college campus that they're going to potentially go to. And both my boys were playing sports at the time. And so you always tell them, look, don't go to that college to play hockey or to play baseball. Go to that school because you feel like you fit. Because if you get hurt or you don't make the team or you're not playing as much as you thought you should or could, you're not going to, if you like the school, it's because you fit. And so, it's amazing. You'll see a student go on campus and like, they'll just look around and you can look in their face like, I feel like I belong here. I feel like I fit. Well, that's what's so important. And the same happens as you approach your career. Do I fit here? And to your point, do I fit morally, ethically, and culturally? And so if you do, then you can make it through the difficult times. But if you don't fit, then you always feel like I don't belong here. And then you're going to transfer, right? 50% of all the kids transfer from one school to another. Think about how many people we know change jobs. Like you're on your second one. You could be on your third one pretty soon if you don't feel that. Not that that's a bad thing. It's just that it just kind of reinforces the point we're both talking about. As you're entering that workplace, it's important to feel good about the job you're doing, but feel good about the place that you're working.
No, exactly. Yeah, and that's exactly it. And it's always this continuous process of finding companies or business ideas. That's why I really like this podcast, because I see this as I'm creating and cultivating a future, an alternative pathway for myself and potentially for other people too that are listening to this. What this is doing, this podcast for me is it's creating and cultivating, excellent relationships with people who I could potentially be able to meet in the future when all this pandemic's over and actually, go and have these chats in person too. But also they might really like me so much that they'll want to get to know me a little bit better and we could potentially work together. You just never know.
Absolutely.
Or it's just, it'll create a opportunity along the lines of in media. Cause I love to talk to people and get to know them. And I'm just always been a really curious person. So I feel like this is kind of like until I find my fit with my career, this is going to be like, I'm going to be utilizing this and trying to build a business off of my podcast, because I love it so much, to see how it can evolve and see if there's any future opportunity that can come out of it.
Oh, that's a great plan. So we talked about it from a company perspective. So companies have values, missions, and so I think there's 3 questions that people have to answer as well as companies have to answer. The first question, and and this is so important. I talk about this when I get the opportunity to speak with juniors and seniors in college or juniors and seniors in high school, talking about, beginning that either next step going into college and potentially a career, and then coming out of school, getting ready for that career. I think there's three questions that I think are important that you have to answer in the confines of your own heart and conscience. The first one is, who am I? So who is Alex? The second question is, what does he stand for? Or what does she stand for? And the third one is, what are the things you won't compromise? Now, clearly on a company side, the same three questions are important. Who am I? Who are we as a company? What do we stand for? What won't we compromise? Now, think about some of the companies that have had their share of issues. Wells Fargo, Volkswagen, just to name a few, right? I mean, here's a company with over 150-year brand, Wells Fargo, and look what they went through here in the States and around the world. They clearly knew who they were, right? If we walked in one of their facilities, they had mission statement, value statements, posters everywhere. They probably knew who they were, what they stood for, who am I, what do I stand for? But now number three was the key. What are the things I won't compromise? And the same is for that individual. And if you think about it, that becomes your brand. Well,
Right.
individuals have, you have a brand as well. You're just starting to build that brand. And so the first step I would suggest to your audience and to you is the first step I would say into developing your personal brand is the answer to the following question I'm going to ask you. And I think each person should ask themselves is, what's the one word you want people to use at the end of your career to define you? What's that word that you want someone to use, you want people to use at the end of Alex's career to describe Alex? What's that word, do you think?
Tenacity. I won't stop at nothing until I get what I want.
Okay, so tenacity. So for me, the word was thoughtful. To other people, it could be integrity. It could, be, aggression, tenacity. So for me, the word was thoughtful. I wanted to be considered a thoughtful leader. And if you think about it, if that's your word, tenacity, then your whole career is building your mosaic to that word.
Gotcha.
That becomes your brand. And I think I when I have these conversations with people all the time, I always say that, what's that word, especially as you're coming out of college. Now that word will change potentially over the course of time. As you, depending on the roles or responsibilities you have, you may adjust the word tenacity, because if you become the CEO of a company someday, tenacity is a great word, but kindness may be a good word. Caring may be a good word. Servant may be a good word. But at the end of the day, tenacity is always going to be a core component of who you are. But the key to this conversation is you're building your brand. What's the brand? So when you think of, if I yell dilly dilly, everybody laughs and understands exactly what that brand means or what that term means. Or if I said to you, hey, send the package overnight, as much as it pains me as a former UPSer, you say FedEx it, right? If I sneeze, you say, here's a Kleenex. Well, those are products, but they've become synonymous with brand, right? Well, it's the same with you as a person. If someday I start a job and I'm working for Alex and I say to a friend of mine who's there already, hey, what's Alex like? He describes your brand. He describes what your brand's about. He describes your brand promise. So I think that's what's important as you during your career is to establish your brand. Now, if your brand and your brand promise matches up with the brand and the brand promise of the company, it becomes a really good fit. But like a company, when you break your brand promise, you lose that customer. When you break your brand promise as a person, you lose the people in your care. You lose your credibility, and it's so hard to get that back. It may be generations before people trust Wells Fargo again, or potentially Volkswagen, or any company that's had this share of problems. The same is true with you as an individual, not you personally, but a person who breaks their brand promise. It's hard to get that back.
Right. Well, that's all the time we got today there, Rocky, but really appreciate your interview today. And I definitely want to do another interview with you in the near future here, and we'll talk about your book and go more into detail on that and other stuff as well. And just an awesome conversation today, and I've learned a lot, and I really look forward to our next interview soon here.
Well, thank you, Alex. I enjoyed it as well. As I said, my website is 360 Management Services, and a lot of these conversations, I have a lot of YouTube videos on there about a lot of these subjects. And the book is Tighten the Lug Nuts, as you said, and we actually have a website, tightenthelugnuts.com, for more information. We're Amazon 5-star review, so feel free. And if any of your audience would like to engage with me, you can do it on contact me on my website, but also my email address is rockyromanella@gmail.com. But I think you'll find that many of the topics that we spoke about tonight are in the book. So the book is not only a great story. It sounds boastful, so I hope you think it's a great story. But each chapter is a lesson that stands on its own as well. So it becomes a workbook. I've gotten quite a bit of people get back to me and say, hey, it's a great workbook for me as I'm growing and developing as well. So, but thank you very much for the opportunity, and always available for another conversation or anything you or your audience may need.
Awesome. Really appreciate your time today, Rocky, and really enjoyed our interview today. You take care.
Thank you. You too. Right. Be safe. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
Yeah, you too. You as well. I hope you all enjoyed episode 27 with my special guest, Rocky Romanella. Again, he's the CEO of 3Sixty Management Services, keynote speaker, and the author of Tighten the Lug Nuts. And if you wish to get to know Rocky a little bit better, I have all of his links posted in the show notes for this episode. I have his website, his LinkedIn, his Twitter, his Instagram, and the link to his book website, Tighten the Lug Nuts book. So if you want to learn about leadership, you want to learn about becoming a great leader, thoughtfulness, this is the book to read. And if you want to book Rocky for any speaking engagements, you can also reach out to him as well on his book site or his website, 360managementservices.com. And I hope you guys all enjoyed that episode. And let us know in the comments on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts, what you thought of this episode. And again, thank you all for listening, and much appreciation to Rocky Romanella for joining us today on the podcast, and see you all next time. I hope you all enjoyed this special guest series episode brought to you by RadioGuestList.com. Again, this is your host, Alex Muir, and if you'd like to learn more about kind of what I do and this podcast, MindCep Podcast, you can check me out on my social media. I always post all my links of my social media in every episode that I post, and I share all my posts, my podcast posts on my LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, so you'll be able to check out the podcast links on there. So if you want to connect with me, get to know me, I will be answering messages on there if you have any questions. And again, if you want to hear more episodes like these, or if you have any feedback, please let me know on social media. You can send me a message, or you can feel free to follow my podcast, and be sure to keep checking in and see what I'm up to. I really appreciate everyone that listens to my podcast, and hope you guys all enjoyed, and see y'all next time. Take care.